My guest at this time is Cathy Ruse. She is the Senior Fellow and Director of the Center for Human Dignity at the Family Research Council. She joins me today to talk about how public schools are dealing with the issue of transgenderism. Recently, earlier this month, the Washington Post highlighted a story of transgender activists reading to a group of kindergartners in Arlington, Virginia, just across the river from the nation's capital. And Cathy, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Well, the story begins with a teacher at this school who happens to be gay, and then they brought in a transgender activist named Sarah McBride from the Human Rights Campaign. And here's how the story unfolds, at least briefly. Dozens of kindergarten students sat cross-legged in the classroom at Ashlawn Elementary School in Arlington, Virginia, listening as an advocate for transgender rights paged through a children's book about a transgender girl. Quote, "I have a girl brain but a boy body. This is called transgender. I was born this way," the advocate, Sarah McBride, read to the students from the storybook I Am Jazz. McBride, a spokeswoman for the Human Rights Campaign, who drew national attention when she came out as transgender the day after her term as American University's student body president ended, wanted to relay a message of tolerance on a national day of reading led by the country's largest teachers' unions. And so there's clearly a debate about what the curriculum should include on this issue, Cathy, and certainly what age. Let's start with your reaction, first of all, to this being discussed in a class full of kindergartners.
Well, it was completely outrageous to use National Read Aloud Day. You know, of all the stories you could possibly choose to read to a kindergarten class, they're going to read a transgender story. But it's worse than that because the parents were not fully notified and they were not asked permission to have their kids in this event. We have been able to get a copy of the letter home to parents through a FOIA request. The letter does not tell parents they have a right to opt their kids out of this event, nor does it tell the parents that the person reading to their children will be a man who identifies as a woman, who calls himself Sarah, and who would then go on to talk to them about how some people are born in the wrong body and how he was born with a boy body, but he's really a girl. So this whole event, it was very inappropriate. The parents were not notified. Let me add also the letter to the parents, which didn't disclose some of this, was only sent home in English. Arlington has a very large English as a second language population. And in fact, pursuing with the school further, we found that several children in this read aloud classroom for this event are from families who do not speak English at home as a first language. And so their parents may not have been even fully aware that the event, it's impossible to know how much they knew about what their children were about to be exposed to because the school didn't bother to send home the letter in a language that they can read as their first language. So the whole thing is manipulation. It's bullying on the part of the school, bullying these kids and their families, and it's all to further a political agenda that has no place in public schools.
Along with the story, there's a picture of the reading going on here, and sitting right next to McBride is Lily Eskelsen Garcia, the president of the National Education Association, actually holding up the book while McBride talks about it. So what do we know the NEA and the American Federation of Teachers are long affiliated with liberal causes and so forth, but when you see this type of intertwining, what does it tell you?
Well, it tells you that they are now not going to try to hide their true agenda. I mean, we've known for a long time that they've been pushing pushing politics, really, on kids in public schools. But now they are coming out and they are bragging about we must partner with Human Rights Campaign, which is the largest LGBT activist group, lobby group. And they're just open now about it. We are partnering with this group. And we are bringing their agenda into public schools, paid for by your tax dollars. So it's these people who work for us, who are serving us, the public, and are being paid by us, are now, to a great degree, undermining families' values and families' beliefs without even asking, without asking our permission, and in some cases, many cases, without even telling us.
We're talking with Cathy Ruse of the Family Research Center. And Cathy, I think from what I hear from folks on your side of this debate, there seems to be a lot of different frustrations. But one of the biggest ones is the always creeping agenda. In other words, when the Supreme Court decision of 2003 came down, banning state laws against sodomy, the argument had been, well, this isn't going to affect anyone. We're not pushing for marriage or anything like that. The decision comes down. The push for marriage begins. The lead all the way up to the 2015 Supreme Court decision is, we just want to be left alone. We don't want to have anybody tell us how to live our lives. We don't want to tell you how to live yours. Supreme Court sides with them. And over the past 4 years, there's been a lot of effort to get people to not just allow what they want to do, but champion it. So what do you make of the progression here? Right.
I mean, the progression has gone so far that dissent even is not allowed. Dissent now is seen as a form of non-discrimination or a form of hostility in public schools. Many, many, many school districts now have changed their non-discrimination policies. And in these changes, they are imposing transgender mandates, which mandate conduct, behavior, speech. We are all being made to be soldiers for this cause that many of us don't believe in. So it's gone so far beyond tolerance. And let me say, you know, we all, of course, would have a lot of compassion for a child who is confused about his sex. And there are historically a tiny percentage of children who do suffer from sex confusion. But the way not to help them is to tell them, yes, you're trapped in the wrong body. You should reject your body and pursue dangerous hormone treatments and eventually surgery. That is not the way to help them. And beyond that, it's the way to hurt other kids who never conceived of the possibility, the idea, the very harmful idea that they might be born in the wrong body. Well, now they have their teacher and the head of the teachers union and this activist sitting in front of them saying, yes, you might be born in the wrong body. That's tremendously dangerous. This is what the American College of Pediatricians calls child abuse. Child abuse. Psychological child abuse was perpetrated on these kindergartners with our tax dollars in Arlington County. So it's reaching a point. I'm sure we're going to see lawsuits soon, and we ought to see lawsuits soon against this behavior on the part of adults that are bullying kids in this regard. And it might take lawsuits to make them stop, or at least slow down what they're doing.
What is age appropriate to even address the issue? Not even getting into advocacy, as these two people were clearly doing in this situation, but to simply explain to kids as part of health class or biology class or whatever it is, what it is, just in a very academic way. I'm guessing you think kindergarten's too early, but what do you think? Because this issue is in the public sphere now, and kids will eventually hear about it. So what's the right way to address it with them? Well,
the transgenderism is not scientific. It's not a scientifically based phenomenon. It is really an agenda-based phenomenon. And so really the question is, should non-scientific or unscientific material even be part of sex ed lessons in public schools? Remember, these are public schools. These are schools that the public's entrusting their children to for a period of many years. And, you know, sex ed does not have to cover every single possible idea that a child can be confronted with in society. There's a role for parents to play. So I would say that as long as parents are asked permission first before a lesson on transgenderism is given to their child, then that's a really good policy. Just ask the parents first if the child's not, and the parents know their kids best, and every child is different, and some things are appropriate at a certain age for one child. I mean, people with children know this. But today, schools are not asking parents permission. They're automatically enrolling every child in these classes, and in many cases, they're not even notifying parents. So that whole paradigm has to shift. If we see a shift to a permission-based sex ed curriculum, well, then you can explore with parents what the best age might be.
Cathy, you mentioned that it's not part of biology, it's part of an agenda. Explain that a little more and where you think that agenda is ultimately headed.
Well, there is a tremendous debate in the medical community today about what's the proper medical response to a child or an adult suffering from sex confusion. It's called gender dysphoria. It is in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. It is a form of real suffering. I mean, it's something that shouldn't be belittled at all, and there should be great compassion for people who are suffering from sex confusion. But up to that point is the only point where we see agreement in the medical community. Beyond that, how to respond to it, there's tremendous debate. And so for schools to come down and to pick a side, well, even though the medical professionals can't decide the best way to respond, we're going to go ahead and sign on with a human rights campaign and do everything they want us to do. Because what the Human Rights Campaign wants schools to do and wants all of us to do is to push these kids down the path of no return. When you put children on puberty blockers, followed by cross-sex hormones, you not only suppress puberty, but you stunt growth, a growth that they can never get back if they decide later that to accept their bodies. There's all kinds of health risks that you subject these children to. And then, of course, there's looming ahead, not too far down that path, is surgical mutilation of their healthy bodies. In Oregon, I believe they've just lowered the age to it. I actually can't remember the age. It's a teen, though. A teenager in Oregon now can get sex change surgery without his parents' consent or knowledge. A teenager. Now, importantly, the American Psychological Association says up to 98% of kids who are suffering from sex confusion will grow out of it naturally. They will accept their physical body. But what we all have to ask now is that if groups like HRC and the NEA and all these other activist groups force schools to heap affirmation on children who are confused and to sow confusion in other children, will they ever come to accept their physical bodies? Will they grow out of this confusion naturally, or are these activists really trapping these kids in the wrong bodies? You see what I mean? There's a great irony here that left alone, these kids will grow out of it, up to 98% of them. But if we start meddling and putting them in this box that you're in the wrong body, then we may be trapping them in the wrong body. And listen, I've been reading and hearing from formerly transgender identified people who talk about the hell that they go through when they are trying to impersonate the opposite sex. It's not a happy thing, even those who are believing that they are pursuing happiness. And many people, if they pursue it all the way to surgery, some of these things can't be reversed. So it's tremendously. We're playing a dangerous experiment on kids when we do this, and there's going to be consequences. And as I mentioned, I hope there will be legal consequences, and I hope that will be soon. These people deserve to be sued.
Lastly, and you mentioned earlier, Cathy, about parents having the option of whether or not they want their kids hearing this kind of material in the schools. If schools don't offer that option, what do you recommend parents do?
Well, all parents can demand that their children be excused from some of these classes. Most states, I shouldn't say all, the majority of states allow parents the right to see curriculum in advance, but the parents have to ask and to pull their kids out of classes that they disagree with, okay? But parents, schools don't make it easy for parents to do this in many cases. So parents have to be so vigilant. You have to demand advanced copies of lessons. You have to demand the schedule of when the next sex ed class is coming up and what is that class going to cover, and show me all the material and show me the videos you're going to show my child. So in other words, it feels as if so many public schools see parents as the enemy, or at the very least as a nuisance, and they do not make it easy for parents to have the information parents need or to allow parents to excuse their kids very easily. As I say, we need a paradigm shift so the schools would have to ask permission every time they do something like this. We're not there today. Today, schools automatically enroll all kids in these radical, age-inappropriate lessons without asking parents' permission. And then if the parents will bang on the door of the school, they can demand that their kids be excused, but that means they have to know it's happening. So it's a heavy burden for parents to bear right now. But if you've got kids and there's parents listening and you've got kids in public schools, do not assume that you know what's coming up, that you know the content of the lesson. Certainly don't assume it's anything that, like you experienced 30, 40 years ago when you went through this. It's not recognizable. You will not believe what's being covered in terms of just many of the things we didn't touch on today. But parents should, sad to say, parents should assume the worst and go in there, guns blazing, get the information you need to protect their kids.
Cathy, we'll have to call time there. Thank you very much for your time today. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Cathy Ruse of the Family Research Council. She is a senior fellow there as well as the director of the Center for Human Dignity. I'm Greg Columbus reporting for Radio America.